everybody, and welcome to another edition of Magic Mics. We get started, as we do every single week, by introducing my two co-hosts, Ruben Bressler.
Oh, hi.
Aaron Campbell.
Greetings.
Greetings and salutations. We have a first pick this week. It was a little bit difficult to pick a first pick this week because last week we were just in Drama Town. We were just in Drama City hanging out, and we were just driving around, and everywhere you went was some amazing topic to talk about forever. And this week it's like, well, you know,
not so much.
People wrote articles and did a thing and said a stuff.
Yeah, not nearly as much drama this week, which is sort of good, I guess, but bad for us. You know, no news is good news.
Well, we found some drama. There's a teensy weensy little bit of drama. Now there was a tournament in Milwaukee. There was a Modern Open, and Aaron, you attended that. Tell us what it was like to attend the Modern Open before we get into the meat and potatoes, before the bacon and the cheeseburger of the point here.
I had a lot of fun. You know, it's always nice when Milwaukee doesn't get very many events. So when the Opens do come to Milwaukee, everybody shows out for them. And they're coming back in October, which is great. And I played ad nauseum. It was a very aggressive meta that I found. Like, Merfolk was everywhere. Lots of Merfolk. Infect was still big. Faux Pod, as I call it, was big. I think there were 2 or 3 copies in the top 8. I just wasn't expecting to see so many creatures. And I didn't do very well initially, but I did meet a lot of lovely people, a lot of listeners, and my friend Emma Handy was with me, and we had a really good time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Modern is before we get into the drama part, Modern is super creature heavy right now, and so it's kind of shocking just how creature dependent the format is. You know, previously when you had decks like Birthing Pod, they didn't really feel like creature decks so much as like combo decks that had creatures as their win condition. Sure. Same with things like with Twin, but now people are actually attacking and blocking in Modern. Like Merfolk, as you mentioned, is super popular. The Faux Pod deck, as you say, are moving more towards a mid-range shell and not trying to combo people so much. Yeah, I definitely agree that it's a whole different world out there.
That's great. I'm happy to hear about a format that requires interactivity versus saying like, "Oh, look, I got A, B, and C. You're dead."
I'm not all about it. I want to light people on fire. I don't want people attacking me. Although, if you don't want interactivity, Joe Lissette got second with Green Red Tron, so there's some hope for you.
Nice.
Yeah. It's nice to see Tron isn't dead. Yeah. A lot of people were predicting that Eye of Ugin would really hurt the deck, and there were some people talking about how Tron would evolve into Mono Blue because Mono Blue never really used Eye of Ugin, and so, you know, especially with Thopter Foundry becoming more popular with Sword of the Meek, you know, there were people like Ali Antrazi that were saying, well, Tron's going to naturally evolve to blue, which doesn't need the eye and can also use these new toys, and it was nice to see people still running with red green and simply adapting in their own way.
It has certainly had to evolve. I mean, people are using Sanctum of Ugin now and World Breaker as like a pseudo, you know, this is the best that we have now. So, but the best that we have now is still good enough. You know, Jund without Bloodbraid Elf and Deathrite Shaman is still just Jund. I'm super excited by this Mono Blue Turns deck, by the way, that I found in the top 32. Aaron, you don't... I can't tell if Aaron would be a fan or not of this deck. It was like,
this deck,
you're gonna love it or hate it. So basically, this deck has 4 Time Warp, 4 Temporal Mastery, 3 Part the Water Veil in it. Are you sold yet?
Oh,
and it's just like Dictative Crufix and stuff like that to just draw a bunch of cards.
I have a very short list of decks that I simply will not play. I could be in the top 8 in an event. I don't need the win that badly, and this deck is one of them. I will
play against it? You'll just be like, no, I don't need this in my life?
Nope.
This deck looks so sweet. It runs Ancestral Vision, finally. Exhaustion, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Oh, this brings back memories, dude. Holy cow.
Yeah, I mean, there was a ton of Abzan company in the top 16 of this tournament. You know, not so much of the zoo that we'd seen in the Modern portion of the Invitational. You know, less burn than I was expecting, even though there was one in the top 4. And so Modern's taken sort of a weird turn, for sure, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm going to, on the screen now, I want to bring up this deck because this deck is hilarious. It's just straight hilarious. Mono Blue Turns is by Trevor Pintico.
This deck's been floating around for a little while, but had not put up any even close to a premier finish. And this one is, top 32 at an SCG Open is not premier, but it's nothing to sneeze at.
Well, I mean, he had to go through day 1. He had to go through day 2. He had to do well enough to cash, and here we are with, 4 dictated crew fixes and 4 ancestral visions, and you got the freaking exhaustions that are from Portal, which is amazing. I mean, just making people skip their untap step is always kind of hilarious. Part the Water Veil, which is great because that was my spoiler.
There you go.
Yeah, that's right. So that's
Everything's
sweet.
coming up, Erwin.
Snap!
We got Part the Water Veil. Look at that.
You know what else? I want to pull up? I'm going to pull up another web page, and that web page is our Patreon page. Ladies and gentlemen, we have cracked another tier of Magic Mike's sponsorship. Our goal was $400 a month. We're currently at $409. Thank you guys very, very much for supporting the podcast. And for that $409 and for that $400 goal to be reached, we are going to create merch, our first ever merch, which is going to be stickers. Now, I have stickers and buttons listed on the website. However, I was discussing earlier that I would like to alter the deal and pray that I don't alter it any further. Which is, I feel...
Big scumbag.
Big super scumbag, because I want to make stickers and magnets versus stickers and buttons. But if the will of the people should have it, and if the feedback from those who have supported us at this point support it, I'm happy to get buttons if buttons is what everybody wants. I just feel like magnets would be a lot cooler, honestly.
Yeah,
I feel more of an attraction to magnets.
Wow.
How do they work? How does that work? I don't understand.
Unbelievable.
Unreal.
But yeah, I think that I'm super happy that we've gotten this far. But I would be happier if we could reach our next milestone. But yeah, the fact that we've hit this milestone is great. I think that people are really starting to, I think that it really hit me when all of this stuff about Pay the Pros was going down and all the judge stuff last week was going down, and people were like, "We missed an episode of Magic Mike's. We needed Magic Mike's. Why wasn't there Magic Mike's to help me fill the void, to explain everything that's happening?" And that was really touching for me.
It was great.
And so I hope that people have enough of a love for the show that they'll continue to support us.
And that is much, much appreciated. However, and because of that, we're going to be another 15 minutes longer than normal.
Right.
Normally our show is ending around midnight, and that's just kind of how it is because I like to kind of keep it nice and succinct. Well, we're going to keep it succinct, but we're going to keep it at 1 hour and 15.
Yeah, 2 of our major donators on Patreon were like, "Hey, this hour is not enough time."
Adrian and Brian.
And Brian. You guys are awesome.
They are the money folks who have decided that our show was not long enough. And I can't say I disagree. So we're going to have an additional 15 minutes.
It was literally a bidding war, too. Like, it was Adrian going, "Well, I will pledge this." And Brian's like, "I can do better than that." And I'm watching, my mentions are just blowing up. And I was like, surely they're going to hit a limit. Surely they're going to be like, "You know what? I've donated enough. I don't have that much to spend." But it was almost like watching an auction and just going back and forth. And I was like, how much money are they going to give us? Like, stop.
Yeah. Like, it was pretty absurd. And I loved it, obviously.
Don't have to say stop.
I didn't think like that, but like, it's just, you just think of, I think what it comes down to is I tend to think of this as just hanging out with 2 people I really enjoy. And so, I look at what we do, and it's not that I don't think we deserve it necessarily, but I am a little disconnected to it. It's like, you want to give us that much money? Like, for what we do? Like, we just do what we do. And it's wild to think about.
Absolutely. So
and
now,
if you like the things that do what we do, then keep giving us money because we've got more goals.
That's right. We have more goals. Right now, we're going to make stickers and probably magnets. And when I make those, I'm going to get them in and I'm going to ship them to every single current Patreon supporter. Everybody's going to get a set of that stuff, and our infinite thanks, obviously. And if we get to $600 per month, which is our next tier, I'm going to pay a professional artist to do a professional token of all of us and then get them professionally printed. And then everybody will get a token. Yay. And we can have merch, and we'll have merch at the merch store.
I'm not a Patreon, but can I get tokens anyway?
We'll think about it.
I don't pay for this. This is like, I don't really watch this show. But I'm a fan. I like that you guys are doing it. I just don't watch it.
it is also the last tier that is defined. Once we have reached there, we're going to have to come up, see what comes next.
Yeah, exactly. And if you guys have suggestions for that, particularly if you're patrons, feel free to tweet at us or email us or post it on the Reddit or whatever. I've seen a couple of people suggest sleeves. They want Magic Mike's sleeves.
Hey, we can get there. We can get there's a path, ladies and gentlemen, and it involves your love and support. Obviously, your love's already here because you're listening to us. So let's keep on with the love, quote unquote, because there were some disqualifications in Milwaukee.
I love disqualifications.
Oh man!
Segue.
I love disqualifications. That one time I got disqualified. Oh no!
Did you get disqualified once?
I never got disqualified.
But
I did do something really dumb one time, and then the judges
I've been investigated, but never disqualified, never caught. I mean, ignore everything that I just said.
I once told a judge he wasn't the boss of me.
Wow.
I can't imagine you would ever say anything like that. That's
right.
That's not an Aaron Campbell thing. All right, so somebody tell me what happens with the DQs. First up, Ruben, can we talk about Mr. Charles Porges? Porges. Sorry.
So, Charles Porges was one of the top competitors in Milwaukee for a lot of the day. He was playing Zoo, one of the decks that I'm a huge fan of. And at some point, the internet noticed that there were some weird things happening with his fetch lands. They thought that there were some weird things happening with his fetch lands, specifically something that some of the forum users referred to as a weird shuffle cut thing after they used fetch lands. And so there are a couple examples of this. The first example is when he's on camera at 5:01 in a Zoo mirror match against Lido Biala. And you can go back and look at the StarCityGames.com open coverage of that. It's around 7 hours and change into the day one coverage. You can see that there. I mean, if you look, you have to look really closely to catch a lot of the stuff that he's doing. But hey, if you're somebody who's been doing mechanics ship for a long time, then it's something that you have to look closely at. And the Star City Games Open Series, unfortunately, is not a stranger to mechanics operating on camera. And so, there are a couple examples of this. Apparently, he played against Jerry T as well, and the same sort of weirdness was present there. They contacted some folks on site, some of the players and some of the judges on site around round 14, where he was near the top of the leaderboard in round 13, and then mysteriously disappeared from the players to watch graphic between round 13 and 14. And so it seems as if that while that is circumstantial evidence, it is strong circumstantial evidence that he was removed from the tournament. And so I believe that this is probably not the last that we will hear of this particular gentleman.
Well, there was Tom Ross was tweeting about it a little bit. He had tweeted on May 2nd, I don't know how Porges does it, but his best draw flies out of his deck mid-shuffle, and then he draws the second best possible. Mm-hmm. At the time, there was a single creature in his way from an Alpha Strike, and I think he was still winning with an Alpha Strike, but he was just trying to make sure, 100% that he was going to get there. And the best draw he could have was a Lightning Bolt, and sure enough, it flew across the table, and then he just so happened to draw Path to Exile. So, stuff, and it was the top card of his library wasn't changing while he was shuffling and all this other stuff. So there was a forum post, and there was a post from the man himself about how he knows he shuffles weird and stuff, and it's another one of those, like, it's kind of weird and icky, you're not really sure, there's enough question marks, there's enough people who have been in Magic and know Magic and are very good at Magic who are saying this is weird and this is not correct. So next thing you know, poof, he's off the leaderboard.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it seems like this style of character is drawn to the StarCityGames.com Open Series, which you've had experience with, Evan, as have I, with characters in the past. Sure. And the thing is that people, the thing that always strikes me is that every time something like this happens, someone on Reddit or Twitter or Facebook will say something along the lines of, "But why doesn't he just not cheat when he's on camera?" And the answer is very simple. He can't help himself. People who need to win or are addicted to cheating cannot help themselves. It's not a conscious decision of this will be good for me, but if I do it on camera, it'll be bad for me. That's not how their brains work. If it and thank goodness it doesn't, because if that's how their brains work, it'd be a lot harder to catch them. And so we have not heard the end of whatever. We've not even really heard the beginning of whatever is going to come of this Charles Porges incident, because we don't even know if he was DQ'd from the tournament officially. We've not heard any word. However, all of the context clues suggest that he was DQ'd from the tournament. And so, we'll almost certainly have more news on this as it develops, as the banned and suspended players list is updated in a couple of weeks or months. If we get word from Star City Games officially or something like that. Or if we get another awesome letter to the community about Underground Dojo keyboard cage fighting, which would be great. I would love that too.
But to keep up the drama, it's not the only DQ from that weekend.
I want to build off what you said, though, Ruben, because I think you said something really great, and I think this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. You mentioned the psychology behind cheating and how, for a lot of people who don't cheat or don't have that urge, it's as simple for them to say, well, why don't you just not do it when you're not on camera? And I think this also leads to discussions about the punishments as well. Anytime someone is banned, I think Betcher got 3 years, and people were like, is 3 years enough? And would you allow someone to come back after 3 years? And I think I think the psychology of it is oftentimes left out of the discussion. If this person spends that 3 years dealing with their issues and possibly getting professional help, and if they come back after 3 years and own what they did and said, what, I had a problem, I've sought help for it, and they come back, I'm completely for that. Right. And it's interesting. I think we just don't talk about that enough, and I would love to hear more about that. Like, I'd love to read up on that and just see what really makes people do it, because we don't really talk about that. It's just simply, you did it and you need to go. But there's a lot that goes into it, and especially. Sorry. Oh, no, I was just going to say, especially, the competitive atmosphere that we're in, where it's like, we're in situations where you can come in 15th at an open and nobody cares. But 15th is great out of 900 people. And so, we are in this really competitive atmosphere where you're either first or you're last. And, to say that doesn't play a part in things, I don't think is true. It's just fascinating to talk about.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that it's also not, that's another thing that you mentioned, which is, why would you let them back into the game at all? But we've had lots of reformation stories of players who've returned to the game after being suspended for suspicion of or blatant cheating, either admitting to it or not, and coming back to the game and being productive members of the community. So, I think it's not as easy as being cut and dried with it, they cheated, we need to get rid of them forever. Sure. Now,
well, this is the paying their debt to society, right? Is that what we're talking about? Ultimately,
absolutely. I think it's more than that. I think it's also, doing, it's also kind of admitting it to yourself, admitting and saying, you can deny and deny and deny, but until you actually say, I did this, I cheated, you can come back to an event and never do any wrong, and that will probably sate the masses. But, to want to be better for yourself, to want to say, I want to be better, I don't want to be this kind of person, that takes a lot. And I think that's something people don't oftentimes do. They think, if I just give the people what they want, I get to come back. And you will get to come back, but I respect somebody more when they want to work on themselves too.
Well, and everybody loves the redemption story. You've seen the politicians do some crazy, horrible things, and then they go like, I'm just I'm throwing myself at your mercy. Can you just forgive me? I know I did horrible things. It's like, there's always that kind of like, they have to kind of get it out, and they have to fess up, and then there's that point where like, okay, now that you've gotten out and you got to fess up, all right, now you can rebuild on something. Right. It doesn't
Magic
mean
community is not like that.
Magic
community does not. Magic community holds a grudge. Like, for example, Tomoharu Saito, by all accounts, is one of the most accomplished players in the game. Got into the Hall of Fame and was subsequently, after being elected, but before the induction ceremony, suspended for time management issues. Basically, he was taking advantage of the shot clock, which is not something that you're allowed to do within the rules of Magic. Sure. And after he's come back, he's been the perfect citizen. There have been occasional things of like but pretty much at the same rate that anyone who is a deliberate player. I guess he's playing slow here, but there are other players who play slow that are, it's not like he's using the clock like he did to warrant his ban. And yet, he is still vastly not on Hall of Fame ballots, even though he's eligible still. Yep. So, the Magic community requires more than simply saying mea culpa. It requires more, this community, by and large, because of it's a thing that the Magic community just doesn't take lightly or as lightly as the common as other hobbies or other cultures.
Yeah, I mean there's definitely that sentiment that Saito has to earn back what he lost, because everything that he earned or won or accomplished before that point in time is tainted. And whether all of it's tainted or just a little bit of it's tainted or whatever you want to look at it, there's some amount that makes you question everything that happened before that moment and how he took advantage of certain things all the way up to that moment. If certain things are still happening, there's question marks, blah, blah. If Jared Betcher or Alex Bertoncini comes back to the game, I mean, they're going to be watched like hawks. No one's going to trust that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and everyone's going to, anything that they do, oh my God forbid they make an actual honest mistake, no one's going to believe them. I mean, they are the boy who cried, drawing extra cards and two explorers and whatever.
Right. Well, the thing is that oops, I made a mistake is where a lot of them hide, right? Yeah. Oops, I didn't mean, hey man, that was an honest mistake. I didn't mean to draw 4 extra cards off the brainstorm. But that's that's where they hide. That's where a lot of people take advantage of the rules, you know. And Paper Magic is different than any other game, really, because you have all 4 types of all 4 types of information in addition to lots of piece manipulation. You're manipulating the pieces to the game a lot with your hands. You're shuffling a lot, you're moving cards around from different zones. And so it's very easy for someone who's good at the mechanics, which is like a card sharking term of being able to fix a deck. It's very easy in comparison to other games to be able to do that in Magic. And also the punishments are relatively low. These guys, a lot of cheaters, people will say they were literally stealing from people, but they are not treated like felons.
Like thieves.
They're not treated like thieves. They're suspended from a game and then allowed to walk free. So it's an attractive environment for thieves, in addition to a spot where the physical manipulation skills are useful. And so it's always going to be a problem compared to other games, because Magic, just by the way Magic is done, it's always going to be a problem. The best thing that we can do is, hey man, putting them on camera is a great way to start. People slip up a lot more when they're on camera. We can go rewind the videotape and take a look. So that's a good place to start. But
it's such a double blade. It's a double-edged sword where you're like, you want to put them on camera to keep them honest, but you don't want to put them on camera because you give them notoriety. Like,
right.
You can't have it both ways. So anyway, Aaron, tell me a little bit about the other DQ that happened that weekend, because while we're getting in the dirt and while we're getting into the juice, it's pretty crazy.
Oh, girl.
Here we are.
Hashtag oh girl.
Hashtag girl.
Okay. So Chris Anderson is a young man who is known for being on the Star City circuit. He writes for Star City Games, and Chris happened to be at the Modern Open like I was, and apparently he wasn't having a very good time. So Chris had posted a tweet on April 30th and said, regarding Modern, pick a NASCAR and start turning left. Hashtag Modern is gambling. Jeff Hoagland responded to this and said, can you come salt my French fries for me? Oh, we're not done. We're not done.
Here we go. Here we go.
So then Chris replies, I'm sure you have enough to salt your own fries.
Salt your own fries. By the way, after the bacon on your cheeseburger level of our Patreon, salt your own fries level.
Salt your own fries is coming next.
Right, not even salt your fries. It's like I'm not salting yours. You're salting your own. Like that's
Salt your own fries is a nice one.
And mind you, I'm living
all
of this. Yeah. Okay. So then Jeff says, I won one match today, haven't complained on or off social media. Sometimes that's the game. Very level-headed, honest response. Chris replies with, I have not gotten to play a skill-intensive match of Modern in months. The format is fundamentally flawed. Jesse made a joke. Jesse's the guy he was quoting in the first tweet. And then Jeff continues to be very level-headed and calm and says, if you think you've played every match perfectly and it just didn't matter for months, then you aren't being critical enough, which is very true. Again, Jeff's very much the hero in this. And then Chris says, dude, piss off.
Okay.
Well,
What? I didn't win a single game today. My grandpa died today, and the last thing I need is your toxicity in my life. So that's the preamble to this. So we're not done.
So that's our base. That's our base.
That's where we start.
What's the foundation for this really shaky house that we're about to build? So cut to Sunday. They end up playing in the Legacy Classic and get paired up against each other in round 1.
Oh, yeah. You couldn't have scripted it better.
That's where this story, this is not. I just wouldn't have believed this story.
Yeah, I wouldn't have believed that Jeff played Legacy. That's what I thought was the shock here. I'm like,
sure.
What?
Well, this is the part where the TV show reviewer goes, this is BS. This would never happen. This is convoluted. It's just circumstantial BS. Whatever.
Okay. So there is a god and she is kind. So she pairs these two together for round 1, and Jeff is on some sort of all-in red sneak attack shenanigans, which I faced before and is freaking not fun. But anyway, so Jeff is playing this, and game 1, he gets a turn 1 Blood Moon.
Yep.
And Chris...
I've done that. Those are fun.
See what I mean?
You are what the
Tumblr kids call problematic. Yeah.
Wow.
There, I said it.
Tumblrinas. There you go.
So Jeff lands a turn 1 Blood Moon, and Chris has had it. Chris is over it. And the next part of this I have not confirmed, but I hear it went down like this. So everything Twitter to Blood Moon happened. We can confirm that happened. Okay. So allegedly they went to a game 2, and Chris had some sort of Thoughtseize duress discard effect and takes the sneak attack from Jeff. And Chris is going, okay, I've got the sneak attack. I'm good. I'm all good. And then Jeff top decks the sneak attack. And Chris loses his damn mind. And so he gets up, pushes his table hard enough into the table to knock decks over, and then storms out of the open. And then gets DQ'd for aggressive, unsportsmanlike, whatever. Right. And yeah.
Wow. And here we are. I mean, it's one of the things where I don't want to harp too much on Chris. I understand he lost his grandfather. That's a big deal. Yeah. That's the thing. And at the same time, you don't want to say that any of this type of behavior is okay. And then the last aspect of it is Jeff Hoagland is talking about people being salty.
That's the issue that I have. So I'm not a hero either when it comes to behaving myself in situations in which I'm being handily defeated during times when I've had a problematic previous 48 hours. Mm-hmm. I am by no means a saint. I would have no friends at all if people in Magic, if people only judged me by my in-game behavior. Mm-hmm. And I've talked about this many times. I have a huge problem. This is part of the reason why I don't play as much, because I would prefer to be looked at as the jovial, snarky guy on Magic mics, and not the huge jerk who complains that my opponent top decked a sneak attack. Mm-hmm. But the problem here is that Jeff, as a messenger, is a problematic messenger. It's not that he's a bad person and he comes up with great ideas and he's super nice away from the table. I've had nothing but good interactions with him personally when Magic cards aren't in front of us both. But you need someone who is more of an angelic figure to deliver this message. You need
angelic.
You need a nicer person.
Nicer is one thing. Angelic is I need a saint.
Sure, you need Reid Duke. You need Reid Duke to deliver this message.
I need Superman to show up.
And it's tough. It's a tough needle to thread to be both Chris and Jeff in this situation. I think that to begin with, Jeff did stick his nose in where it didn't belong.
He kicked the hornet's nest.
Chris was in a fragile emotional state and was prone to be poked by a stick. And so this was sort of a perfect storm happening here. Sure. I don't particularly think less of either of them. No. Because I think I respect the hell out of Jeff and how smart he is and how much he's done, especially recently, for the Magic and the streaming community. Cranderson is one of my favorite people, and I identify a lot with Cranderson, and he's done a lot for particularly the new rejuvenated team dynamics of the Star City Games Open Series. And so I think that both of these guys, this is a fight that I just don't want to have happen because I like both of the guys involved.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they both aren't wrong. They're both wrong.
No, I mean, they are. I mean, you have, and I love Chris Anderson. I think that guy's been great. He's one of those guys. Chris Anderson is one of those guys that when I met him and I watched him play, I'm like, this guy has something about him. He's got the charisma. He's got the talent. If he can control his emotions, as some people have issues doing, you can get really far. It's really tough. Magic is easy to get just 100% invested in what happens in a game that has variance when the best in the world lose a third of their matches, like the best in the world. So it's sometimes really difficult to look at it as your opponent's always running hot or you're running cold or you got, you just got top decked out of it or whatever. So, and Jeff, who, again, I agree with you, smart dude, super cool. He works really hard. It's obvious he makes a ton of content. I got nothing but love and respect for the guy, but I think that there's an issue at times with perception. Now, I went over this a little bit in the pre-show, and I think I have a better handle on it now that I've kind of stumbled my way through it, and you guys got to hang out for that.
You actually stuck your toe into this debate a little bit.
A little bit. Well, I do, because I'm trying. I feel like I'm trying to help. I want Jeff to be as good as he possibly can be, and I think sometimes he doesn't always see how he's coming off. So somebody tweeted at Jeff somebody tweeted at Jeff Hoagland, calls opponent an idiot on stream. If you don't want people to be toxic to you, don't be toxic to other people, which I think is reasonable. Jeff Hoagland says, this is all capitals, literally no different than calling them, quote, the enemy or the bad guy. We don't actually mean they are bad or dumb. And I go, Jeff, I got to disagree here. Words mean things, as they do. He comes back to me and says, then calling them, quote, the bad guy means they are a bad person and people should be equally upset. And I say, there is a severity to the terms you use. If you equate idiot to the bad guy, then you should reevaluate your terms. And he says, that isn't what I said in the slightest. And I'm like, okay, we're getting into nuance, even though I thought it was kind of off. When he said this is literally no different than calling them X, okay, whatever. I'm just trying to help you be aware of perception. And he comes back to me, says, if the word idiot generically makes you feel bad, you are probably going to have a bad time on the internet. To which I respond, dismissing people's reaction, feelings, and perceptions is going to hold you back from being an effective community figure. I think he is a community figure, but the problem is some of his notoriety or some of the things that he's known for are negative. And the reason they're negative is under his control. He has the ability to change these things. And it's not just this type of thing where he's calling his opponents idiots, which you shouldn't do because no one likes to be called idiots. Who cares? Ruben, what do you write down when you play somebody?
I write on my life pad.
Yeah, on your life pad.
I write down hero and villain.
Yeah, if you wrote down hero and idiot,
that would be much different.
That's different. Words mean stuff.
Yep. Villains are very smart by and large, and heroes are pretty dumb usually. So.
But you have the ability to look at it and understand the perception of the words that you're using to describe your opponent. That's all
I might start describing myself as the villain now that I've thought about it. Villains are always more entertaining.
Yeah, we are. I mean, I relate to, I'm kind of like you, Ruben. I've been very open about the fact that I have not always been the best loser, and I'm still not there yet, but I would like to think that I've come a long way. I have actually lost friends over it. There are friends that I do not speak to because they have cut me out of their lives because they were like, I cannot be around your negativity anymore, and I deserve that. I have nobody to blame but me for that. So I'm always really, again, going back to the cheating thing, I'm always really fascinated by what goes on in people's minds when this thing happens. And, when I read about I was entertained by this because I think like anybody, sometimes you just want to see a train wreck happen. You want to see pros behaving badly. I didn't really have a personal dog in the fight, but it was amusing to hear about and it was amusing to read. I was very hesitant to see, almost the condemnation where like you said, he had one bad incident and there were people that were completely willing to write him off. And, he has done a lot of good. I think of the work that he's done with those kids. I think they're called the Kiefer kids, and like he's mentored them. I think he does coaching or mentoring beyond that as well. And so I'm always
also
really
just has kids, right?
Right. I'm always just really Hoagland has kids. I don't think Chris does.
No. Chris is 13 years old.
Hoagland does.
But the bottom line is people are always really quick to use one event against you. And to say that one thing defines somebody or to say that is worth completely shutting somebody out for, it really concerns me. It actually makes me feel kind of uncomfortable because, the Lord knows if I was certainly, I've said some dreadful things. And if that was all I was known for, then I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be part of the Community Super League. But, thankfully there are people that I personally have grown, and there are also people who've seen the good in me that have said, that is not you. When you walk away from the table or whatever you do, there are other sides to you. And so I think it's really important to see that. And even the same with Hoagland. Hoagland and I are not the best of friends, but he's an amazing deck builder. He's brilliant. I've played him before. He's been a great opponent to me. I can separate the two. I don't look at this and say, and put him in a capsule and say, this is all he has to offer. And I think it's really important that we let people be people. And then to be fair, you also see the opposite happen. Like, remember when Ari was at the Pro Tour, Ari Lex, and he won, and people were mad because he was too excited? There's a weird sort of stigma here, and I'm going to try not to get too feministy about it, but it's like, the whole thing about guys not showing emotions. It's like, you're not supposed to show emotions when you're doing well, and you're certainly not supposed to show them when you're doing poorly. And I remember, I actually did go to my therapist. When I lost ties with friends because I was being negative, I talked to my shrink about tilting. And it was very interesting because my shrink is also a woman, and she was like, well, what are you supposed to do? Like, you can't say you didn't enjoy the match. You can't say you didn't enjoy something. You're just supposed to hold it in. And she was so confused by the concept. And so I think that is certainly an aspect of this. If you're supposed to hold in your feelings, be good or bad. And God forbid if you don't, you are immediately cast out and how dare you. And so again, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of complexity to this. And I love talking about it. And certainly I can relate to it.
I think it's brilliant. I mean, I think the extreme of it is Kanye West, where he's very proud of how good he is and how much he feels he's good. And honestly, I think it's weird because as much as he boasts about himself, then he makes a really good record, and you're like, yeah, fine. You're the best. Shut up. It's like, it's ridiculous. But when you can back it up, you can back it up. So when Owen Turtenwald is tweeting, I'm the best and I'm doing it, and he goes out there and he top 8,
and then he does it. Yeah.
It's like, look, dude, he can back it up.
Yeah.
So
he's doing his Kanye best.
Oh, wow.
Better than all the Kanye rest.
God, dude. All right, moving on to Desperate
That's not Kanye
Ravings.
mess.
Oh my God!
All right, I'll give it a Kanye rest. All right.
Oh my Lord! All right. Community Super League happened this week, which was nice. Aaron, you were a part of it.
I was.
You got lots of kudos for your commentary work. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's awesome. So tell us about the Community Super League. Tell us who's in it. Tell us what you're doing this week, which is really interesting. And what we can expect moving forward as this Super League in particular kind of happens.
Sure. So the Community League was another project of Randy Buehler's. He said that he wanted to make a league that just wasn't as cutthroat and as competitive. He really wanted something where the emphasis was on fun and being excited about cards, being excited about decks. He wasn't looking for tight play and pro tour level commentary. He really just wanted a group of entertaining people that represented different sides of the community, get them together once a week and have these really crazy formats and just have fun. And so naturally, me and the girls from the Girlfriend Bracket were invited. Kenji Yagashira, Aaron Forsyth from Magic R&D, Gabby Sparts, Marshall Sutcliffe, the girls from Magic the Amateuring, the professor from Tolarian Community College, Wedge from the Manosaurs, Paul Cheon, and the people from Loading Ready Run. We are the cast. And last week was just the Pro Tour Gauntlet. We did a draft, and this week is going to be the Innistrad plain format, where we are to build decks using only the cards from Innistrad block. and then Shadows over Innistrad, and Lingering Souls and Intangible Virtue are banned. But other than that, we can use anything we want to. And so the girls and I put on our brewing caps, and we put on, we came up with all sorts of ideas, and everybody's been kind of chipping in, and it's been doing really well. We peaked at 3,500 viewers last week, which is as much as the Vintage League gets on their good nights. We had over 25,000 clicks on our videos. I got recognized a ton at the Open just from doing this. So the turnaround time was short. Like, you figure this was on Thursday and I was getting recognized on Saturday. So there were people that were really tuned to it. I had people from like my personal life that were like, I'm watching you right now on YouTube. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. And so but it's just a lot of fun. And it was surprisingly positive. Shout out to Athena Huey, who kept the whole thing going, because it's very hard to do. There's a lot that goes into it behind the scenes. And it was just a universally positive experience. And it's great to work with these people who I would normally not get a chance to work with.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I loved it. The little bit that I watched. First of all, Aaron, kudos on commentary. It is it's not terribly easy, but I guess you had Marshall, which is nice. Wow. It helps when you. No, I'm curious.
Are we backhanded?
No, it's not backhanded. I'm saying it's nice when you have an experienced person in the booth, but you definitely held your own even with Marshall, and well done. And I really enjoyed the Community Super League. I wanted to be able to plug a couple of people. You mentioned Athena, who's _Elantris_. And then I also wanted to shout out Living Cards MTG for the greatest intro I've ever seen in the history of Magic content. And I've made a lot, and I've watched a lot, and I'm talking to two people who've made a lot of Magic content. The intro for Community Super League is the best intro I've ever seen ever. It's hilarious, and it like gives you the characters, and it does everything. And he also animates Magic cards, which is a cool thing that he does, and he's just a very talented dude. He's also done like the Channel Fireball intro creepy thing with the teeth.
Oh, that's the teeth thing? Oh, that's the
he does that. He did the teeth fireball guy, which is creepy. It's cool, but it's creepy.
It's cool. It's super creepy.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's like the first time they ever did that kind of Hell's Kitchen-esque, everybody's doing something crazy. It's not just like a person in a picture or a person who's like, cooking or whatever. Like, no, they're, they're in the jungle swinging or whatever, or they're skiing down a mountain, you guys, you're in Magic cards. So I thought it was super clever.
Living Cards MTG, definitely go follow him. He's worth following. And definitely _Elantris, ELANTRIS_. She does all of the behind-the-scenes work for Community Super League and Vintage Super League. Former roommate of mine, and she's just a very talented human. And you should definitely send your Twitter love their way.
Awesome.
A little bit of behind the scenes dirt. So like when I hadn't seen that intro video before, and Marshall and I were the first ones doing commentary. And the way that the videos go is when you're up, when it's your turn to do coverage, and the videos play, Elantris whispers in your ear, "Don't say anything." Like, she does her production thing or her producer thing, and so she's like, "All right, and quiet. The video's rolling." And so we're just sitting there, and I hadn't seen the intro, so I'm watching it from her screen, and it just kept getting better and better. So it was like amazing. Like Kenji as the vampire, then it was Gabby as the vampire, and I'm already like, my smile's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time I saw Magic the Amateuring as the twins, I just lost it. I was like, yep.
And it leads off with the professor from Tolarian Community College getting whispered in his ear from like maddening whispers or whatever that card is. It's so good.
Better and better. And then Marshall with the giant bicep, and then me and the girls as the unruly mob. And I just couldn't hold my chuckling. And I'm like, oh God, I'm not supposed to talk, but this is so great. And just being just a thrill to be part of something.
I loved it. I think that focusing on community members is a great way to showcase all the great things that we have to offer, particularly streamers who are as prolific as you folks. So I can't wait for the next. Also, Graham Stark from Loading Ready Run should just do commentary. Like, he's just so funny.
Yeah,
I broke up laughing when he was I forget who he was talking to, but he was like, yeah, some of the people who are participating in this, they practiced. And I just like lost it. Just the way he said it was so funny.
We did. The girls and I read articles. The girls and I read articles. Like, we watched deck text.
You guys went out there and you guys did things like practice. It was so good. So yeah, I that's something that I will continue to keep watching. I mean, I've been watching all of the Vintage Super League also, so it's a really cool project, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Did you just bust a segue up in there?
Boy, I did, because I'm a professional.
Wow. Like a pro. So tell us about this Vintage Super League that you mentioned, Ruben.
So this is what edition is this? 5th? I don't know how many.
I don't know.
What day is this? Is this a weekday? Season 5. Yes, season 5 of the Vintage Super League has just kicked off last week. It's going to be Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. on the official Magic channel, twitch.tv/magic, just like the Community Super League is Thursdays, also at 6?
I don't know.
Yes, Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific time, but we're actually thinking of bumping it up a bit to 5. But
okay, I was going to say bumping it up to Wednesdays just isn't going to work.
No,
No, that's not cool. We don't do that.
We had 12 names that you might recognize: Kai Budde, Nick Koss of Card Titan Games, Reid Duke, Caleb Durward, Brian Kelly of Kelly Oath and Kelly other vintage decks, Bob Marr, the great one, Tom Martell, Steve Menendian, Mean Deck, nice. Shuhei Nakamura, Andrew Probosco, another huge vintage name, Paul Rietzl, and Dave Williams, who we'll discuss later. Yeah. Notable MasterChef in addition to poker player and Magic player. We're playing in the play-in rounds for this season of the Vintage Super League. And the notable thing, other than having all these great players, is that in a format that's so old and some people had thought had gotten stale, of these 12 players, there were 11 archetypes in the play-in rounds.
Wow. So
which I thought was spectacular.
Oh, it's fantastic. And, Reid Duke's in there, and,
did he win?
Somebody on this podcast is a pretty decent fan of the guy. And sometimes even calls him Bay. And during the pre-show, I think we busted out the best
Baywatch.
Moniker is Baywatch.
Yeah.
So
new segments on the show.
New segments coming. It's going to be Baywatch. And this week's Baywatch is Reid Duke's playing Storm in the Vintage Super League. Oh, damn.
How do you feel about Storm, Aaron?
Yeah, Aaron.
I love Storm. I actually want to build Storm in Modern, but everybody's talked me out of it. They won't let me do it. I need at least one deck in my repertoire that doesn't lose to Rest in Peace. And Storm also loses to Rest in Peace. But no, I love it. I'm completely... Yeah.
Unfortunately, you don't get to play Ad Nauseam in Reid Duke's list.
Right.
But, win some, you lose some.
And sadly, Reid did not win, unfortunately.
That's why I'm not watching anymore.
There you go. Look. We had some interesting innovations in this as well. I mean, Kai Budde played Stax with the recently restricted Lodestone Golem, which I thought was super interesting. Nice. The weirdest card choice, I think, for my money, was Caleb Durward played 2 copies of Scab Clan Berserker in his Delver deck. Which is cool. Like, there's a lot of cards that cost 3 or less.
Which is cool.
That's basically
that card.
That's the renowned Pyrostatic Pillar 2/2 haste guy.
Wow. Bless his heart.
That's a thing.
Really?
Yeah, I just thought it was... look, man, you're asking the wrong guy. So I thought that was a super interesting one. But yeah, I thought that all of these were really cool decks. And the last one I wanted to mention was, it's Paul Rietzl. He's playing in a tournament. He's going to play white creatures. And so he played white Weenie in Vintage, which was just spectacular.
That's amazing, by the way.
Yeah, he played basically Death and Taxes, but in Vintage you don't want to play Aether Vial because there's so much artifact hate. So he was just playing, the Moxen instead. Just playing like Mana Crypt into Vryn Wingmare on turn 1, stuff like that.
He's playing Spirit of the Labyrinth. He's playing Leonin Relic Warder, Leonin Arbiter, Stoneforge Mystic, Thalia, Containment Priest, Ethersworn Canonist, Viren Wingmare.
You can miss me with that whole deck.
Wingmare. Yeah.
Veer and Wingmare is
not a good deal.
Look,
I thought that this was a super cool play-in event. And I can't wait to see what's coming this time around on the Vintage Super League. It keeps getting better and better as far as I'm concerned. I really like the rotating cast of commentators that they have. I think Randy's put together a really cool project.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be real clear on what card you were describing earlier because I thought you were talking about something else. This is a Magic Origins rare.
Which one? Wingmare?
Scab Clan Berserker. Is 2 red and a generic mana for a 2/2 haste with renown 1. So when it deals combat damage to a player, if it's not renowned, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it's renowned. And whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, if it is renowned, Scab Clan Berserker deals 2 damage to that player. So every time they cast a Mox and they cast a Brainstorm or they cast a Ancestral Recall, they're taking damage. This is not the card I was expecting to see in Vintage of all places. I was hoping it was going to get there in Standard, and it never has.
Yeah. Well, it's currently legal in Standard. You're still allowed to play it. It is legal to play. Probably not suggested, though.
Yeah. Seems a lot.
So is this like the community league where if you lose, you're still in it or you're eliminated?
I don't know how it works for the play-in rounds, but I believe that for the actual tournament, it's a double elimination to see. I think the entire thing is double elimination. I'm not entirely positive. Sure. I think that there might be another way to qualify, even if you lose your first 2 rounds, to qualify for the playoffs. But that's several months down the line at this point, 2 or 3 months away.
That's okay. So Reid's not completely done.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, because I heard that his commentary, by the way, was quite good as well, and so there's some hope for perhaps an Aaron Reid commentary team. Community vintage.
God!
League.
Oh
I would
man!
die.
Yeah, which would mostly just be
filed
Reid
a restraining
talking
order
and
by
then
that
heavy
point.
breathing.
Next week on Baywatch. You know what I'm saying? Baywatch is coming every week. We gotta dial in. We're like, what's this week on Baywatch?
Chad is telling me that the play-in rounds are triple elimination. So you got, if he lost this week, he has at least 2 more rounds for you.
Yeah,
that's good news.
So let's move on to Gather the Townsfolk. Gather the Townsfolk this week. Talk a little bit about Puka Trade. Now we talked about Puka Trade. Was it last week or the week before?
We talked about Puka Trade a long time ago.
It's been a while, maybe 3 weeks ago. Regardless, The point is we spoke about Puka Trade and the Puka points, and there being this inflation problem. Is there an inflation problem? There's Zimbabwe I was throwing around in terms of them having $1 billion bills because they destroyed their currency. And so this was also where Puka Trade was under the spotlight because they hadn't done any of the promises from their, I believe it was their GoFundMe campaign. And there was an article that was posted, and it's really interesting. It's by the guy who created Puka Trade.
One of my tweets is in there.
Yeah, Eric Freitag, and it's
2014.
It says how Puka Trade manages point supply, and it goes on to say that they have been looking at it, and that they've been studying it, and that there is thought behind it, and that there is some amount of there's some points in the system, and there's good amount, and there's bad amounts. They're going to change the amount of points that new users get from 700 to 250. That's going to happen, I believe, next week, they said. And it goes on. He actually shows charts and data of the velocity of trades. And, how many times trades are initiated, whether it's modern staples or whether it's legacy staples, the monthly average in terms of the velocity of trades. Like, there's a lot of really cool data in here. And Aaron, you're being snarky, which is great. It's just awesome. It's what
it was 2 years ago.
It was, wow.
Not much has changed, however.
Man,
But you're right.
Now I love Puka Trade. Puka Trade has helped me build decks. I'm a big champion for it. Yeah.
The quotes that they took from you were from 2014, which was a little weird. This whole article is like a little Sam Hinkie. Sam Hinkie was the previous manager of the 76ers, who was one of these like, I'm way smarter than everybody kind of guys. Mm-hmm. And it kind of smelled like that to me a little bit, and so I'm still not really sold on it. But I can appreciate his passion and his resolve. Some of the sentences in here are really mostly all about the future, particularly his conclusion at the bottom. He's just mostly looking towards the future and saying that the early days were volatile, but we've established that this is a thing that can work. So let's keep making it work. And so I'm. While I will still probably not become a part of the Puka Trade community, I'm sorry, everyone. I think that Eric Freitag there's a lot to like in what Eric Freitag wrote in this post.
I know, I agree. I think there's some amount you can almost say is this about like a smoke screen of graphs and charts and data to tell you what's really going on? I don't know. I think that it's genuine. I really think that the guys spend a lot of time trying to explain the case of how they're looking at the data and what they want to do with it, which I appreciate. There's certainly the amount of I'm very much right, and you need to understand how right I am, and here's how right I am. Right. I get that. Ultimately, it's nice that they had the this to me is a response from something that happened weeks ago, and that he's probably been working on and trying to craft and make sure he's got the message correct, and he explains things, and he has the data to back it up, and that's fantastic. But there was certainly a point in time there where it was in Puka Trade's best interest to tackle the problems head on and say, look, either we know about it or explain that this article's coming, and that that Eric Freitag is going to explain what is going on, just so you guys know. And we didn't come through with our promises on the GoFundMe and all that stuff that we talked about weeks and weeks ago. But ultimately, I'm glad this exists, but it's still kind of a little cloudy as to exactly what's going on with Puka points, other than they're They like the frequency of trades. They're going to remove how many points they give new users. And isn't this data cool? I mean, yeah. Okay. Am I missing anything?
Sure.
Everybody? All right. Perfect.
No,
all right.
Look, it's like, also I mean, it's, I don't know. It's really weird trying to translate digital currency into Magic, which, as we've talked about multiple times, is vinyl. It's archaic. So he's trying to take this really old thing. I mean, it's not really old. It's only 20 years old. But comparatively speaking, Magic is the old man of gaming. Like, it's the oldest. Unless you're talking about chess, Go, or poker. That's like that's older that people care about.
When they do Magic Online, it's going to get real. It's going to explode. When I can trade, all right. So when I can trade my Ulamog right here, when I can trade this guy to play in a Magic Online draft, like that's awesome.
Stick it in your 3D printer.
Well, no, I mean when I send it and I get the Puka points and I'll get tickets on Magic Online from it, and as a result of buying those tickets from my Puka points, now I can play on Magic Online and I don't need this card anymore because I got it during the pre-release. I don't play any more Magic except I don't really play paper Magic but pre-releases.
Right.
But regardless, that's going to be absolutely huge. I'm 100% going to be in that system as soon as they add Magic Online. And he teases it there at the end, and that's great and all, but we haven't seen it so far. But once they do, it's going to be amazing.
I mean, there's a lot to like in this post. If you want to go to Puka, it's pukatrade.com. It's the top post. It's a letter from the CEO. It's very easy to find. Go take a look.
Right. So moving onward, Mark Nestico wrote an article. Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about Magic as a team sport?
Yeah. So I really enjoyed this article. So Mark kind of talks about there was an announcement or an article done about Jim Davis recently, and that Jim Davis has recently become part of a team, and that they have somebody sponsoring them, and they were all at SCG Milwaukee. They had on their matching jerseys, and they were there in force. And there are a lot of people that were treating this like a very novel concept, like something revolutionary. And Mark was kind of saying, I'm certainly happy for them, and that is something to celebrate. But you have teams like Pantheon, Eureka, Team Bolus that have been around for a while, and so they're not a novel concept. I think what makes it so novel is it seems to be a team that actually works. Yeah. Personally, I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody invite me to a team or say to me, I'm thinking of starting a team, and then it never happens, and that's really common apparently. And so Mark was kind of talking about like what you need to do if you want to get a team off the ground and what these guys might in fact be doing. And he gives you tips like, number one, the importance of being the den mother, that somebody has to be the captain, and you don't necessarily have to be the greatest player on your team, but somebody needs to be there to like make the hotel reservations, make sure somebody has the cards, make sure that the team is set and ready to go when they need to be. Another tip that he gives you is uncover your identity, like figure out what your role is going to be on the team. Are you the person who can grind day and night and is always willing to sleeve up and play? Are you the person who maybe doesn't play very much, but yet you're in tune with all the articles and the metagame and things like that? Assigning roles and knowing what role you fill in your team, and also kind of understanding each other, and just lots of really great tips and things that I think more people could learn from, and possibly by reading this article we could see more successful teams.
I think one of the big points before I pass it to you, Ruben, is that there's always been Pro Tour teams, but there's never been like amateur tour teams. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the first that has really said, like, we are a team, we are doing this. The Disciples of Bolas was also another one that I didn't have as much fanfare because they didn't have the person who won the Players' Championship the year before or whatever. Mm-hmm. That SCG is helping Star Build. So those things have existed already, but it was a pretty big spotlight that were put on these guys, and they took Jim Davis to PAX East so they could talk to Twitch and Twitch's segment or whatever. They had him on there when they didn't really need to, but instead they were trying to focus on like, here's our winner and here's the guy who does great at the Open Series, and you should see this guy, know this guy, and check out his new initiative and so on and so forth. So it's nice that it's getting lauded, but I think that's kind of the real big difference here. Ultimately, teams are and unbelievably volatile. It's I mean, like a lot of really good Magic players are very type A personalities. They want to lead, they want to be in charge, they're always right, or they're very confident that they're right and must absolutely 100% be proven wrong in order to be wrong. And when those things start, floating around, all of a sudden that's why teams kind of keep shifting all the time. But the shirt sponsorships or whatever stay the same because, the sponsorships can stay. You're just wearing a shirt, but I can't work with that other person because of XYZ they did the last time we were testing or whatever happened in between last Pro Tour and this Pro Tour. Ruben, tell me a little bit about your experience with teams. You went to Theros, Pro Tour Theros, to cover one of the, lauded teams at the time. That was Team Star City Games, and that team blew up into a million different, pieces now, and some of them are under the Ultra Pro umbrella and, all that stuff. Just give us a rundown of your impression.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of experiences with various teams, honestly, in various different esports. Magic particularly, as you were referencing, I spent a week at a castle in Ireland with the 15 members. 14 of them were in the castle. Godenis Vidagiris ended up not being able to show up at the castle for any amount of the time. But, I was living in the house. It was me and Jeremy Knoll of Star City Games, who was also on that Twitch panel. Right. And we were in a house with Owen, Reid, Huey, John Finkel, Gabe Nassif, Kai Buddha, Matt Costa, Brad Nelson was on the team at the time, Sam Black was on the team at the time, Paul Rietzl, Matt Sperling. These guys were all in a house together testing for Pro Tour Theros, which was the mono blue Devotion Pro Tour that Sam Black ended up making top 4. Revolution ended up finding a similar deck and ended up winning the Pro Tour. And it was pretty well established that was the deck that everyone that broke it. It didn't really break it, but it was something people hadn't really seen before.
But they broke it in a way that hadn't been seen in a while.
Yes. And, I'm sitting there on a Tuesday watching them play Cloudfen Raptors, and I'm just thinking to myself, they have lost their minds. What is happening? They're playing, Frostburn Weirds. What is going on? And then they just crushed the tournament, obviously. But, it's situations like that happen. Later on in my career, I was living at Eric Froehlich's house, renting a room from him, when at the time that Channel Fireball iteration had it also included face-to-face games. And so in addition to LSV, EFRO, there was also Mike Sigrist and, Sam Pardee and, Josh McClain and Alex Hayne and all those folks. And they're playing things like Girapur Aether Grids and like In Soul Artifacts. And I'm just like, they've lost their minds again. How does this keep happening to me? And then they crushed that Pro Tour again.
Obviously.
But I think that the team aspect, we've had teams in Magic for a long time, but they weren't necessarily called teams. They were called just testing partners, right? The Target guys in the early days of Magic, groups like that have always sort of existed. Metagame Gurus specifically is doing something very different than even Team Star City Games had ever done before. You can go to metagamegurus.com. You can see their partners. They have, in Mark Mexico's article, he says you need to have somebody who does the organization, who does the den mothering. Well, this team has someone doing that isn't playing Magic in these tournaments. That's a very interesting change. They have a team manager that is totally focused on letting their players be the best that they can be. The only time I've ever seen anything similar to that is when Danny Batterman was helping out Team TCG Player back when Craig Wesco won his Pro Tour. When that team was sort of happening. So I think that this is a direction that is quite good for Magic. I love to see the switch towards more esports style teams with the jerseys, with the partners, with the official website, that kind of stuff. This is just the next evolution of that kind of thing. And I love this. This is what I love the most. I like seeing the team dynamics. I like seeing the teams try to compete against each other while the team members also have to compete against each other. Because the drama of when Jim Davis has to play against Andrew Jessup on a feature match is great drama, in addition to having, Emma Handy of Disciples play against Jim Davis of Metagame Gurus, right? Or play against Chris Anderson or anyone else on that team. So I think that's a really cool thing. Adds another level to the story, makes watching Magic more exciting, and that's what I want.
Yeah, I would know. I mean, I think that teams have been. I think that a lot of playtest partners were teams, but they didn't call themselves that. Some of the most famous ones did consider themselves. There was Toget, as you mentioned, the only game in town. There was CMU, Team CMU.
Sure.
That had a bunch of people who work in R&D now. For example, Eric Lauer was huge on CMU, and Randy Bueller and Turian, and like the guys were insane. But regardless, it's really cool to see. So a team manager, if that's a thing, that's amazing. It really is a step forward because there's very little organization when it comes to Magic teams just in general. We kind of mentioned it a couple of times. Somebody has to book the flights. Somebody has to make sure everybody eats. Somebody has to make sure there's a taxi waiting for all these people to take them to the one particular place, or that everyone knows that they have to make their own way there. Sometimes you don't even know and you just assume, and everybody assumes this and such assumes that, and all of a sudden they don't have anywhere to stay. They have nowhere to get, no way to get there, and no one has any money because all the currency conversion places are closed. You know what I mean? Like, all these kind of dominoes can fall if someone's not there trying to keep people on track. So teams are super cool, really interesting. We're going to keep moving to the Red Zone. Now, the Red Zone this week, I want to talk a little bit about Mark Rosewater's Tumblr post, where Mark Rosewater runs Blogatog. The markrosewater.tumblr.com is his ability to answer questions. He gets 1 million questions. He answers a ton of them. I honest to God don't know where he gets all this time to answer all these questions, but he answers a whole bunch of them. And the question in particular here was talking about reprints, and that Magic the Gathering desperately needs reprints to keep the Eternal formats viable for new and more casual players. And it goes on to say, and it keeps things simple for enfranchised players. If you reprint a card we already know, it's simple to understand, and so on and so forth. Why don't you reprint old staple cards from older formats? And he says, well, here's the problem. The vast majority of cards that matter in Modern, that are powerful enough to be relevant in a format with that many cards, will horribly warp Standard. We experimented in Theros with Thoughtseize, and it went badly. So if the question was really, if we reprint Standard, or we reprint staples from Modern or Legacy or so on, and it's not going to warp Standard, well, that's not true, because it totally did. Like, Thoughtseize it warped the format around it completely, because it was the best card in Lorwyn, it was the best card in Theros, and it's always the best card usually in almost any format in which there aren't 30 sets. Like, if there's only 4 or 5 sets, it's going to be the best thing.
Yeah, I'm just going to disagree with Mark Rosewater. That's what I'm going to have to do here.
Hello.
Okay.
Everyone else, it's the Red Zone. What else am I going to do?
Yeah, buddy.
He's a smart dude. He knows what he's doing. In this case, he needs to figure out how to infuse the older formats. This is a problem. He's the boss. He gets to choose how to do this. But, Conspiracy and Commander doesn't really do it.
Yeah.
Well, I can already hear them. If Wizards is watching, going like, "Duh, Modern Masters," and you're like, "No, that's not enough." And they're like, "Eternal Masters in a month," and you're like, "Nope, still not enough."
That's not a thing. No,
that's not good.
You know what? You know what happened to the price of Tarmogoyf when Modern Masters came out? You know what happened to the price of Tarmogoyf when Modern Masters 2 came out? Nothing. Nothing really happened.
Zero. Actual no movement of the needle.
And the people who, and more importantly than the price not changing, is that there was still the need for those cards. And so Thoughtseize is a great example, actually, where people could actually get into older formats as a result of Thoughtseize being printed. Now, was it a extremely powerful card in the metagame? Yes, absolutely. Did it ruin the metagame by itself? Which is what I believe was being insinuated there. No. I still think Mono Black Devotion is still almost as powerful as it would have been sans Thoughtseize if they had to run 4 Duress instead. Mm-hmm. So I don't buy that exact argument. I see his point. I see that you don't want to reprint, you don't want Vendilion Click coming back into Standard. You don't want Bitter Blossom coming back into Standard. Those are just 2 example cards. You can't reprint, let's say, let's say somewhere down the line there was a shortage of like Ancestral Visions or something like that, and then they went back to Dominaria and Suspend became a thing again, and then they reprinted Ancestral Vision. Is that really going to warp the format to a point where it's not worth it to infuse the older formats? I don't think so. But the perspective that I think that Wizards has is that they don't particularly care right? We've already eliminated the Modern Pro Tour. We don't make any money off of Modern or Legacy or Vintage anyway, so, like, who cares?
Well, that's fine. I get that, but you're wrong and I hate you. Now, listen.
Hey, now, you don't take my line, you stupid.
Hey, I can take it. Now, I think Wizards is saying that they're doing the best they can with Modern Masters. Okay, sure. They're doing the best they can with Eternal Masters. Okay, sure. But ultimately, I don't think Thoughtseize ruined anything. I think it's very clear that it warped everything around it. Like, literally everything was, you can't rely on a certain 1-card or 2-card combo because Thoughtseize. If you're going to play black, you have to play Thoughtseize. And Thoughtseize plus any immeasurable amount of powerful cards, which they gave them in Pack Rat and Desecration Demon, turned out to be completely ridiculously overpowered.
Yeah, that's okay. So specifically for Thoughtseize, you're right. I think that it's now we can't compare it to an alternate reality. We don't know what would have happened without Thoughtseize.
Sure.
I happen to think that Mono Black Devotion would have still been the best deck even without Thoughtseize.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you slot in Duress or some other card that if they'd reprinted a different 1-mana discard spell of some kind, if they'd invented some other kind or just printed Despise or something like that.
I disagree. I mean, Thoughtseize killed every answer to them on turn 1. If you had a good card, you know how it is. You remember playing that format? You'd get like one sweet sideboard card and you'd be like, oh man, this is so awesome. And like turn 1 Thoughtseize and you're just, ridiculous. Sure. Why am I even playing this game? Blah, blah, blah. Flip tables, get out of here.
And you're right that, the thing that made, yeah, exactly. The thing that made Mono Black Devotion so powerful was that it had Hero's Downfall. Destroy any creature or planeswalker. Pack Rat. Discard any card, right? Thoughtseize. Make them discard any card. It was so wide and so varied in what it could handle that it was a huge problem. And Mutavault, of course, being just a man land that was also a Pack Rat, was a big problem. Those are problems that they should have, honestly. They should have foreseen. However, I don't think that you can imprison future reprints for the faults of Thoughtseize. Well, I think that saying that Thoughtseize is a bellwether is a mistake. I think that there are other powerful effects that you can print in order to rejuvenate older formats without them being Thoughtseize in terms of being so ubiquitous and so powerful for such a low cost that you can't reprint them. I think that there are cards that can be seen in Standard that aren't going to be nearly as powerful as when they were first in Standard.
Well, I think for me, the number one thing also to recognize is that Wizards does respect the secondary market because there are card game manufacturers who don't. For those poor people who try to collect and buy and sell Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's difficult at times when, they're like, look, not only are we going to reprint these $80 cards as commons in this little box 10 set thing, they also ban popular, powerful archetype cards so that the new cards and the new mechanics are the best in the format. That to me just blew my mind. I was like, what? But apparently that's a thing that they do, and I can't imagine that ever happening in Magic. And I think it's great that the stewards of the game, the people who do control these keys to our kingdom, do recognize that, Thoughtseize is a $20 card or what have you. Tarmogoyf is worth that amount of money, and it's important not to just gush it out there. And I think these people don't always know what they're asking for. They don't always recognize the repercussions of doing things like, well, let's just reprint all the expensive stuff, every year as best as we can, and you're just destroying value.
I understand that, but it's not a binary solution. It's not It can't possibly be as simple as we can't do it this way, so we can't do it at all.
Sure.
And the ways that they've tried, they've tried, as we mentioned, with Modern Masters and Conspiracy and, Commander expansions and stuff like that. But there's got to be some middle ground here where they can figure something out, something like a dual deck. Dual decks are a good way to infuse cards into the market, but they haven't really utilized, things like dual decks or beginner decks or stuff like that as a way to introduce older cards that people want more of. Now, I guess it's a little bit hard because you have an established MSRP, but maybe there's a way to do it. I'm not the guy that you want coming up with the decision. All I know is that saying that Thoughtseize is the reason why we aren't going to try anymore is a problem.
Well, you could also take his comments out of context. Now, Aaron, how you feel about all this? Exactly.
Lols. It's funny though. The issue that comes up for me is, you mentioned that respecting the secondary market, and I think that's the problem and I don't really have a well thought out response to that, but I think it's you mentioned that Thoughtseize is the problem. I think that's the problem. I think doing that dance around the secondary market is the problem. I said it.
I think it's incorrect that the fact that Magic cards have grown in value more than the stock market year after year on average, and that's a thing. And I think people like that. I think that's part of why Magic has lasted as long as it has, is that the sales of the game will continue to some degree regardless because of collectors. And ultimately, again, there's that prize value of having something and knowing that there are no more Black Lotuses are going to exist in the world, and that's powerful stuff. So, all right, anyway, let's move on. We're gonna round the corner to our final segment, which is the finisher, which I do not have set up correctly. So in all of that time, I was not able to make that stuff happen. But I'm going to. I'm loading it right now. And I'm saying words so I can keep the segment running. You shut up. I'm doing it. Here we go. We did it. All right. Way to go, everybody. We got there. Now, the finisher, ladies and gentlemen. The calligraphy of combat is written with the strokes of sudden blood. That is the flavor text for Monastery Swiftspear. And this week it was one of the few dozen sentences chosen as some of the worst examples of literature of 2016 in something called the Lyttle Lytton Contest. So my well-read and wordy co-hosts, what is the worst flavor text you can make for an already existing card? Ruben?
That is an awful flavor text. Well, I think that it's pretty good that the new flavor text for the conspiracy edition of Golgari Thug is actually just going to be Aaron Campbell saying you can't keep a good zombie down.
You can't.
It's true. You're not lying. No one here is telling any fibs. Aaron?
Well, in response, I think the new flavor text for Raging Goblin in Magic Duels 2017 is going to be Ruben saying he raged at the world, his co-hosts, and his life, but mostly he was just snarky.
Yeah. Got that snark.
That's a good flavor text for me.
I like that. It's good. Look, I think they can actually replace Monastery Swiftspear's flavor text in an upcoming set because we all know that its real name is Taylor Swiftspear. And the new flavor text being, oh, you didn't like my old flavor text? Well, I'm just going to shake it off. Shake it off. That's right.
Shake it off.
Shake it off. It's getting crazy because it's a little later than usual.
Yeah.
But you know what? We are people of our words.
This extra 15 minutes made me loopy.
Aren't you glad you paid for 15 extra minutes, y'all?
Y'all, we made it happen. Boys and girls, we got there. So as we round the final quarter to our final slide, I will thank my two co-hosts. Ruben, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Aaron, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks everybody for joining us live here on Twitch or listening to us on our podcast form as we go to our final slide, which is not working because why would it work? You know what?
Come on.
Now I have to make more words. You understand what I'm doing here? This is my job. This is what I do.
My fries are so salty right now, you guys.
You know what? I could salt my fries with your all salt. That's what I could do.
This is getting dirty.
Jesus. You know, I didn't mean for it that. All right, we're going to move on. All right, so.
Magic Mike's After Dark.
Words mean things, Evan, and sometimes they mean more than one thing.
Lord God, they mean all the things. And that ends another episode of Magic Mike's. Thank you for joining us here to discuss all things Magic. I want to thank my co-hosts, you guys, for watching, and hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmikes. Visit our website at magicmikespodcast.com that exists thanks to our Patreon supporters, or follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe, do everything social that tells people that we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmikes, on Twitter at magicmikescast, on Reddit at reddit.com/r/magicmikes, and on Facebook at facebook.com/r/ that's not correct, at facebook.com/magicmikes. Talk to us privately at magicmikespodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmikespodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mike's. Good night, everybody.